Singh Army podcast is back. Latest news coming out of Punjab. Sidhu Moosewala, singer, rapper, artist, murdered in cold blood in broad daylight in his home bend. So this is what we're going to be discussing today. Some of the recent interviews he's given, looking at analysis on those and what could have led to his murder and who is behind it. So Badi, I want to bring you in here. If you can give us a brief synopsis on what's happened and the latest on who's claiming to be behind this.
So he was gunned down in his, I think it was his bend, on the 29th of May. He was in his Jeep. He had two passengers with him, they're saying, and he's been met with heavy fire from the outside. And he, to be fair to him, he's fired back. He had his in the videos that have been released. He's it shows that he fired his revolver at him as well, emptied his clip, but unfortunately he's succumbed to his injuries. A lot of stuff's going on. So just a general quick summary of what happened. So he fought in the elections for Punjab for Congress for the seat in Mansa. He lost that to a guy from Aam Aadmi Party. I think VJ something, I can't remember his full name. Someone might remember later on. But just as of recently, in recent weeks, that guy's been sacked by Bhagwant Mann, Chief Minister of Punjab, for corruption. So it's quite something similar that happens in our country here, where we have by-elections. So that seat was going to be up for contest again, and the talk of the town was that Sidhu was going to win that seat. But what everyone wasn't sure about was which party Sidhu was going to align himself with. Yes, he was at that time a Congress party member, but as of recent events have shown that just the day before he was gunned down, he had meetings with, I think it was Shromani Akali Dal Mandal, is it, Amritsar? And the talk was that he was going to contest that seat under his party. So, you can imagine that's the one Bantik party we've got in Punjab, you can say, that really listens to the Aam Banda of Punjab.
So, Mani, I just want to bring you in here. So, are we looking at a politician? Are we looking at a music star? Are we looking at a Sikh? Are we looking at a progressive, Bantik person? Who is it that's been murdered?
So, obviously, like a global music icon who obviously talked a lot about gang culture and that sort of thing. So firearms, gang culture. I think most of his songs.
I know that was in there, but what we can't deny here is he currently the biggest Punjabi artist in the world.
I think so. I think he's put obviously he's gone taken Punjabi music on the map. It's doing collaborations with UK grime, with American hip hop and stuff like that. So of course in his career he's been very successful and very popular. But he's been talking, but then again, there's been a lot of people talking about Sansath Singh and the Sangharsh. This time round, though, however, it was confusing, and I'm going to be honest. So it's not just the Congress thing recently, but there's an understanding in the Punjabi music industry that on the first week of June, out of respect to the Shaheeds of June '84, you don't do any concerts. And actually, Satinder Sartaaj had a concert booked in Europe somewhere, and he got slated for it by the Pantaks, because in fairness, the Pantak lobby, whatever you want to call it, to the state machinery, the extremist lobby, does have the ear of musicians, and it always has in recent time. So Taj cancelled that show and actually apologised and said it was an oversight and will reschedule it for a different time. Moosewala had a show booked on the 5th of June, and people were, again, the Pantak lobby were not happy about that. And then kind of in a turn of events which probably weren't publicised yet before his death, or as much before his death. I think it was probably literally the day before he meets with I think his name is Jaskaran Singh Wala, who's I think Man's his main guy, to discuss what they're going to do about this election. And as you can see now, Man's gone to Moosewala's house consoling his dad and stuff. So whether he had a change of heart, and there's also this interview again. I'm not sure when that interview is from, but Moosewala is kind of talking about his position in the Congress. So kind of basically being sandwiched in between Pantaks and Congress, because they are the polar opposites, right? So it's very hard. I mean, look, we've got Pantaks in Badal, which Shromani Akali Dal Badal, which has been has done stuff against the Panth and against kind of the Sikh Soj. But the Congress, there isn't really a room in Congress to be pro Sant Jarnail Singh. It doesn't quite exist. Congress, these guys believe Indira Gandhi was the best thing since sliced bread. They put a heart around her neck every year. They put a heart around Byanta every year. They go to the extent of saying if anybody did anything to restore law and order, and we're going to talk about these words, restore law and order, it was Byanta. So if that's their sort, Congress and kind of Sant Jarnail Singh and June 84, they don't quite align. And he, in this interview, he's talking about being sandwiched between the two sorts, that on one hand, the Panthaks are saying you're a sellout, which I count myself in as well, for holding that view. And then on the other hand, people in the Congress saying, right, you're done with that Bindranwale stuff now, yeah? Just give it a rest. And he's saying, no, I don't want to give it a rest, right? My views are my views alone. And I can be that. So why he joins the Congress, there's multiple theories.
So yeah, his idea was I'll be able to make a change from within. I've got a better chance of getting in with these lot than I have anybody else. So maybe in hindsight he's realised now that it wasn't a good idea, because like you said, Baji, he's come out and he said these are the sort of conditions that are being set on me. Don't talk about 84. Don't talk about Santji. Don't even mention Khalistan. You know what I mean? They're like just red alert words that you're not allowed to mention if you're in the Congress party. So in hindsight, I think he has realised that that was a bad idea. Hence why now the news is coming out that he was actually joining Man's party.
So let's move on. Let's talk about the Punjab, because he's been murdered in Punjab, in his home village, in broad daylight. Okay, and recently the Jathedar of the Akal Takht, so the leader of the Sikhs, he released a statement only probably about 7 days ago. Harvey, tell us a little bit about what the Jathedar said and what his instructions were for the whole Sikh nation around the world.
Yeah, so Jathedar Harpreet Singh, they've basically said to the whole Panth that as Punjabis, as Sikhs, that we should be Hathiarband ourselves. And that's not a hukum that's come from Jathedar Harpreet Singh himself. That's a hukum that's come from Guru Gobind Singh Ji, Siddha Sanu Milya.
And for those that don't know what Hathiarband is,
that means to adorn weapons and be prepared for your self-defense and for the defense of anyone else. And that's a hukum, like I said, as Guru Gobind Singh Ji has given to us. And Jathedar Harpreet Singh has just reiterated that, because I guess in recent times that element of our community, of our Panth, has sometimes been forgotten about. It's very easy to let that be by the by, and actually it's quite key that we do stay weaponized as a Qawm for our protection. And really, what on the flip side, the key thing here is that he's saying that there's a failing from the state, from the government, to be able to protect us. And so there's twofold here. One is, we need, as Sikhs, we should be doing this regardless. But the other thing is that actually, don't look to anyone else to do this for you. The police can't be trusted to do it for you. The state can't be trusted to do it for you. And we're seeing that just as on a kind of a side level here with what we're talking about with Musiwala's case. He had his security removed, and within one day, boom, he's gone. So that just shows to you that you could be a superstar, you could be a political powerhouse, you could be anything, and you could be a rising star, but it doesn't matter. So if that can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. So we need to be very alert and very awake to the risks that are out there.
So, Buddy, you just mentioned about how the security was removed from Sidhu Musiala as well the day before. Quite a few people in Punjab have had their government-provided security removed within the last few weeks. One of them being Jathedar of Akal Takht, Jathedar Harpreet Singh. And in retaliation to that, what the government did was they contacted his office and said, I don't know the exact numbers, but let's just say he has 10 security guards provided by the government. They've said, we're going to take X amount away and leave you with Z amount, yeah? He's turned around and said, well, if you're going to take them, I don't need these guys either. So let's take these guys away. So he's removed all the security, and what he said is, we have our own Singhs available who are prepared to do security for us. And then also a day after that, in retaliation to the government taking the security away, Jathedar of Shri, I think it was Gezkar Sahib, Jathedar Gyani Raghbir Singh has also sent his security back from the government, said we don't want it either, and has armed himself with his revolver, with his gatra of bullets, and said we can do our own security, thank you very much.
So we've got our Jathedars, our leaders of our, institutions, highest institutions in all of the world, saying to the government, take your security back. We will govern ourselves. We will do our own security. We've got so much going on in Punjab. And Manny, just want to ask you a question. Has Punjab become the Wild Wild West?
So the promise of the Aam Aadmi Party was law and order and like anti-corruption. So this idea that, so look, even on surface, it doesn't sound bad, does it? Taxpayers' money used to protect people. Why should that be like the taxpayers? Why should that be the duty of the state? So many people have a low level of government interference view, like a liberalized view of politics, which is fine. However, the Aam Aadmi Party, and this was always the question, is a secular party, and it's like a very modernist party. So more than that, they've actually recently they've come quite heavy-handed on a particular Itihas Gurdwara because they said they weren't paying their electricity bill for many years. Whereas what had actually happened was there's been some agreement many years ago that this particular Itihas Khan doesn't need to pay electricity bill. Instead of communicating or saying, right, we're not doing that, new management, yeah, we're taking stock, you need to pay, which is fine. They've landed with police and quite heavy-handed. So dharmic institutions are not going to be. We don't need protection. I agree, like Baji said, and like the justices are saying, we're not saying that all dharmic leaders need government-issued protection, right? Because I can't really say that, because that would be literally the opposite of what Sons of Punjab was saying, right? Which was arm yourself. The government isn't going to do nothing for you, which is exactly what Aam Aadmi Party is saying. Weirdly, in this sense, is that you don't need government They're saying you don't deserve it. Sons of Punjab saying we don't need it. Yeah, we should be in a position, like Baji said, that we should be well equipped enough to deal with this sort of stuff ourselves. But there is a genuine concern in this kind of rampage of we're going to bring law and order. What does it actually mean, and what the actual views are, and time will tell. But there's definitely a shift in Punjab.
And what was the Chief Minister's views on the statement from the Jathedar of Akal Takht in regards to the arms?
Very, very anti it. So again, you can see. So Ekapase was saying you don't need security, right? Which or you strip security, and dusre paase the Jathedars coming around and like he said, sending security guards home and saying we need to arm. His response was, you should be talking about kind of Shanti in Punjab, Aman Shanti in Punjab, and law and order, and kind of towards education and these kind of things. These are just buzzwords that like a modernist anti-religion kind of guys, they really latch onto these, right? Education, law and order. Aman Shanti is the Punjabi alternative that they really liked. Byanta liked Aman Shanti a lot. He used that for tons. I'm here to enforce Aman Shanti and like communal peace. And that's what he was saying to the Jathedar is that's what you should be preaching, not that Sikhs need to arm themselves.
But surely, if we look at the facts now, it's not been long since the the suspicious death of Deep Sidhu, and more recently Sandeep Nangalambia, kabaddi superstar, who was gunned down at a kabaddi tournament. Baji, tell us a little bit about these two deaths.
So I just want to touch on Sandeep Singh's death. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hypocritical of this Aam Aadmi Party government to say we want to clamp down on corruption and all this corruption amongst not just the government side but official side. So Sandeep Singh, what he was doing was trying to clamp down on the corruption amongst the kabaddi circles. It's again, Baji, you touched on, do you think Punjab is the Wild Wild West? Not gonna lie, Punjab is literally just gang warfare at the minute, and it's become even more rife since Aam Aadmi Party have come in. Before, you could say maybe it wasn't in your face as much, but as soon as these guys have come in, it's more in your face. More high profile killings are taking place in broad daylight in front of everybody, live on Facebook, live on Instagram, for everybody to see. And
let's see their law and order. Yeah, let's see how not just Moosewala. Guru Granth Sahib Ji's Beadabiyaan have been happening for a while. Let's see their law and order. So you have to provide someone with an alternative solution. So if we will go to the grave with the view that if someone does Guru Granth Sahib Ji's Beadabi, we are absolutely allowed to take their life. Yeah, which happened literally at Akal Takht Sahib a few months ago. Yeah, and that was celebrated in the Sikh Qawm as per Khalsa Rivaita, as per Sikh traditions. Now, if you don't clamp down on it, and then let's see your law and order. Let's see when the next thing happens, or God forbid, but looking at the trends, something will happen. Let's see how the Sarkar, who have previously been very lax in dealing with it, let's see if these guys can deal with it, or is it just, don't arm yourselves and just keep Aman Shanti, but we're not going to do anything for that. Gang culture will aim to clamp down on and remove security, but when it comes to like people doing Guru Granth Sahib Ji's Beadabiyaan or stuff like that, let's see how they put law and order into practice there.
So, you've touched on the gang culture, and where has this gang culture came from in Punjab? Because we're talking about, 1984 onwards. This wasn't there. It's a recent thing. When I mean recent, I mean maybe last 20 years or less, even less so. And it's something that's rife. It's something that is being labelled as, basically politicians are creating gangs to do their dirty work, and that's how Punjab is run. And who is behind these gangs? Why are these gangs there? And there's been a lot of criticism today as well on Sidhu Moosewala, saying that he was fueling this gang culture. How much of a part did he have to play in it, and how much was he just just caught up in it?
Yeah, so there's a few points here. Really, if we think about Sidhu Moosewala as an individual, first and foremost, he was someone's son. After that, he was primarily known as a musician, an artist, and he was at the top of his game in that respect. We won't look to him as the gold standard of being a politician, because he only just recently entered that. We don't look to him as being the gold standard of what a Sikh is, of what a Punjabi is. But what he did have in him was Punjabi blood that we saw manifest itself time and again when he released, for example, during the farmers' protest, he released the Punjab track, Dilli Bhi Na Palenda Sanu Punjab Kehte Hain. That's a very, very pro-Punjab comment, very sovereign comment to be making. And to put
just translate that for everyone.
Yeah, sorry. So what that means is that Punjab, we're called Punjab, and even we'll even take Delhi down, and that's just Delhi. There represents the central government of India. So and that idea is basically talking about Punjab sovereignty. So really, if he's as an artist, fair enough, salute to him. He was a good artist, but as an individual, like I say, we can't say that he was at the top of his game in terms of in terms of the
politics
on the politics side. That's it. So really, if we look at the recent deaths, like Baji mentioned as well, we're looking at people like Deep Sidhu, people like Sandeep Singh Nangalambiya. These are, including Moosewala, these are people that are youth. They are pro-Punjab in general. They're doing good for our community. They've got the ability to galvanise masses. These were superstars. As a Panth, if we're going to be an individual nation one day, there's space for all this. We're not Taliban. Yeah, there's space for music. There's space for sports. There's space for this. But our superstars are being picked off like this. Anyone that can galvanise the youth in a positive direction. And as we can see, all of these people spoke, whether it was about clearing up drugs from their sport, like Sandeep Nangalambiya, whether it was like Moosewala, at certain times, yeah, fine, he promoted gang culture in terms of his lifestyle and his art, but really, you can see, if you sift through that, that's just a face, if you like, and here and there, you can see his touch points with his roots, and that's what we need to focus on, is the fact that anyone that speaks up, they get put down, and that's, nothing in Punjab happens in a vacuum. There's no individual action that happens that hasn't got connections to higher, deeper wider picture, politicians. And you mentioned about where these gangs are originating from. Moosewala didn't start all these gangs. Yeah, he adopted that culture and promoted it and pushed it and popularized it into the mainstream through songs, whatever it was. But those gangs would be there regardless. And actually, those are promoted, pushed and supported, used, and there for the use of politicians primarily. So that's something that's always going to be there and have a stranglehold over Punjab to prevent us. Ultimately, the aim of the state is to prevent, central state is to prevent Punjab from flourishing. And these are all people that have got the ability to flourish in Punjab.
And Paji, Mani, would you say that Sidhu Moosewala, Sandeep Nangalambia and Deep Sidhu, would you say that they were Khalistani?
I don't know much about the kabaddi player, I'm going to be honest. Deep Sidhu had, from his talks, he talks about sovereignty and being free from Delhi. So Deep Sidhu's content is there for itself. And that wasn't just like towards his death, that was for a long time. Deep Sidhu, we can, in terms of his Soj, we can vouch. I mean, who are we to vouch for anything? But like, as a Qawm, we can vouch for Deep Sidhu's Soj. He turned what was just an economic agitation into Punjab's horn in terms of like Punjab's ability to exist with the wider state and where it fits in. So anybody that takes that narrative by default is Khalistani, right? Whether you like it or not. Anandpur Sahib da Mata, all these kind of things are about the linguistic, the economic autonomy of Punjab. And Punjabi Suba in the 50s, they were talking about kind of Hindi being pushed onto us and stuff like that, and the kind of downgrading of Punjabi in the state. So even that's kind of an element of Khalistan in the sense of putting Punjab and Punjabiyat first in the state. So I don't know much about the kabaddi player. Deep Sidhu, yes, I'd say so. Sidhu Moosewala, so I'm like I said, I'm probably more on the critical side, and that's just me personally. I think anybody that's anti-establishment and anti-state, so take the gang culture stuff. If you're in the gang culture, drugs, money, rackets, violence, all that if you're into all of that, by default, you are anti-establishment, and somehow you're gonna find your way into something or another thing. It's gonna happen, and it's happened. We know it's happening in the UK here, right? People that are kind of becoming in the Panthik scenes have come from all sorts of weird lifestyles and stuff like that. It happened in the Khalistan movement, whether that's Naxals, whether that's people from all sorts of different backgrounds, kind of find their way. Surinder Singh Sodhi, I would argue, yeah. Who else? Dalbir Singh Abhyasi, who became a very well-renowned singer in the Tuksal. People do, from those kind of backgrounds, do find their way into this kind of Sangharsh. So I don't know if I can say that was specific to Sidhu Moosewala or not, right? So without knowing the whole, who it was or which crew did this and what their opinions were on color, there's an absolute possibility. I'm gonna call this. There's an absolute possibility that this is gang warfare. And there's an absolute possibility that the people that killed him and took responsibility for it are also somehow, at one point in their lives, found their way into the Khalistan Sangharsh somehow. So again, I can't. It's not as clear cut as probably we would like it to be, I think.
It's thank you for that, because it gives us a clear direction and a clear thought process, and going back to what I said earlier, is Punjab the Wild Wild West? And what we're seeing here is, dynamic celebrities and popular figures being killed, murdered in broad daylight. So obviously, if that can happen to them, the average Punjabi.
And that, so we're scared of that, or people are scared of, what's it like? I'll tell you of a time where there was law and order, and it wasn't the Congress government, it wasn't the Badal government, it wasn't the state-enforced default government. It was Kharagpur Raj. There was law and order there. We didn't need we didn't need police. We didn't need anything else. There was genuine law and order then. People weren't getting killed for random stuff without the Kharagpurs knowing about it, at least. Anyway, so if anything, whether it's a secular party in Aam Aadmi Party, whether it's a so-called secular party in Congress, whether it's a unfortunately watered down Sikh party, Shromani Akali Dal, we've seen it all. But when can we govern? We can govern when we are Hatiyarband. So during the time of the Kharagpurs, we did self-govern, and we did a pretty good job of it. I'd say we did a better job of, so the things that we're scared about now, we did a better job of it than the most modern party.
I
We
think
did a better job of it 30 years ago.
if you look back when you're saying when it was Karkul Raj around Punjab, how often was it where you'd hear stories about Biadbi taking place? People thought twice. Do I really want to risk the wrath of the Singhs by committing this Biadbi, or do I just stay in my lane, stay in my path? Nowadays, it's every other week something happens.
And we're selling this modern democrat, whatever it's called. Yeah, we're selling this modern view.
This soft touch.
Yeah, we're selling it as kind of progress, but there's progress in Karkul Raj. And of course, firstly, when we're talking about Karkul Raj, we're literally probably talking about maybe 2 years max. Yeah, in complete honesty, and all in a time where the central government is hell bent on wiping out the Karkul. So it's a difficult circumstance. I'm not saying it was absolute begum parha, so as we describe in Gurbani. However, social reform was done then. So we're quick to jump on social reform and kind of progressiveness under state machinery like Aam Aadmi Party ke bhi to bahut badhiya ji anti-corruption hoga. But Karkul Raj, we had social reform. We genuinely had rights for other people as well. We had like all sorts of different aspects of social reform, whether that's kind of female infanticide was at an all-time low in Karkul Raj in it compared to any other state government since.
I think that's what people fear the most. Whenever you talk about Khalistan to them or Khalsa Raj to them, they're like, yeah, but what about the rest of them? What about the people that do practice the Hindu religion or the Muslim religion within Punjab? What's going to happen? And now more recently the Christians as well. What's going to happen to them? But I think if we go back and look at how it was in the Karkul Raj, they weren't troubled. Like you said, Baji, we had social reform. It was peaceful amongst them.
Yeah, it was easy. It was easier, and there has been. It was easier for somebody in the heyday. And listen, I want to put clear water, Karkul Raj, and then I want to put even more clear water, if I can, in the next league above. Sons of Punjab Singh's the Tata Marda Sangarsh. So this is when Sons of Punjab Singh is sitting at Akal Takht. People would feel more comfortable to just come to Sons of Punjab Singh and say, do you know what, someone's bothering our daughter, than going to the police. And that's what reform should look like. So we had the mechanisms to deal with this stuff. Yes, to start off with at a low level, but there was a lot of potential there. And I think it's just unfortunate in it, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to bend to what is like these modernist ideals, where we were more than capable of achieving those things ourselves.
Baji, Harvey, after listening to that, what advice after today's events would you have for our brothers living in Punjab at the moment? If you could give them any advice, what advice would you give them right now?
I think the first advice is really clear cut, which goes back to what Jasar Harpreet Singh said, which is we need to be hatiyarband. You need to be able to protect yourself and protect your families yourself. So that's the first advice, because ultimately, if you're fearing for your safety, you can't do anything else. So you have to fear to protect yourself and your families. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is obviously, Sikhi pakh wala pa dhyan deiye. So let's focus on our Sikhi on a grassroots level, and also so that's on a personal level, but also on a political level, support those parties out there that are actually going to do something for Punjab, support those activists that are out there that are going to do something for Punjab, and really try and align ourselves so that we can step by step move towards being a community and a pant that flourishes.
And it's a great point, because supporting other Punjabis is such an important thing. There's unsubstantiated rumours that Goldie Brar is behind the murder of Sidhu Moosewala, who's a close aide of gang leader Lawrence, I don't know if this is right, Lawrence Bishnoi. Yeah, so if it is Punjabis murdering Punjabis, whether it be India, whether it be Canada, whether it be England, it's a great shame. We were always brought up, anyone with Singh in their name and a Quran in their hand is classed as family.
I think there was a time where there was a really big beef in Khalsa College. On one side were some people who were quite rude, and on the other side was a young Mona Harjinder Singh Jinda. and it was going to go off quite hard. And luckily for Jinder, he'd gone to see Sons of Singh, and Sons of Singh was like, what are you doing? Squashed it. And then later we have one of the biggest assassins that the Sikh Panth or anyone has ever seen, Harjinder Singh Jinder, who went to go did a huge bank robbery for the Qawm, who went to Than Te Jaake Sodde Laye Uni, or such high profile. But that was a Mahapurush, that was a leader who could actually harness that energy. And it's unfortunate we're seeing.
Of course, I mean, just on that, we've seen gangsters like Vicky Gundar, who was with, Jathedar in Jathedar Khalistan Liberation Force, Harminder Singh in Naba jail, who changed his ways, kept his gaze, and wanted to help the Panth. So we've seen this. So all these gangsters, they do eventually, or hopefully they do come into the Sikhi fold and help the Panth flourish. At this moment in time, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Not all the facts have come out. It's quite fresh. It's quite raw. We can only give you a little bit of background and insight onto the things that we've heard and the politics and everything else that's gone on beforehand. As things unfold, hopefully everybody will be privy to the information of who is behind it and why. And we offer our condolences to the family. And we have lost a great artist, but hopefully, as a community, we can learn and we can prosper and we can support each other. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.